Monday True Crime friends, I'm Ashley, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on myself before we get started on why I'm really here. So, I'm 25, I've got a wonderful 3-year-old little boy, and I'm an extremely huge crime fan. So, between my son and just the passion that I have for true crime, it kind of gives you the background on why I'm doing what I'm doing. Um, with being a parent, we all know those heart-wrenching moments where we're in the grocery store or at the park and we can't see our kid or we don't know where our kid went. Most of the time now they do just, pop up like, oh, hey, I went to the bathroom or something like that. But there are those few times where they don't pop back up and somebody's stuck wondering where their child went. And I truthfully could not imagine going through that moment. Now, my parents had to go through that moment when I was younger. It didn't play out quite like I was kidnapped, but after seeing the literal fear in their eyes, and I will tell you this, my parents have never really been like the fearful couple. But with them showing that much fear when I came home, and I didn't run away or anything like that. I went to go hang out with a friend, and there was some miscommunication, and I didn't talk to my mom for 3 hours, but she genuinely had no idea where I was. And I was in the 6th grade, so I was 12. She was freaking out. We lived in a small, close-knit town. Everybody knew everybody. So to think that something like that could happen was just absurd. And, when I finally came home after those 3 hours, the hugs that I got from my parents and the fear I could see in their eyes, I still, being 25 to this day, do not forget that. And I hope to dear God I never have to go through that feeling. And for any parents that have had to go through that, I do truly from the bottom of my heart sympathize with you. Now, when it comes to my true crime side, I listen to a lot of podcasts, I watch a lot of movies, videos, shows, I read books. And one of the podcasts that I listen to pretty much weekly, Crime Junkies, a couple weeks ago, Britt and Ash were going over a confusing, to say the least, disappearance of Gabby Petito, which I'm sure most of you have heard about it. It's literally all over national news. And with Gabby's disappearances, there's a lot of questions, as there are in most disappearances. And most of the time, not everyone's willing to talk about it. They also discussed at the end of that episode another girl who is missing, but no one even knows it besides her small, close-knit town. And that truthfully broke my heart because there are so many people that go missing around the world that no one even knows is gone. Just because they were not some huge, big superstar on social media before they disappeared. And that's kind of why I'm doing this. I want to be able to give those families who, in those hard times, can't find that voice, to rally all of their troops around the world and get all of us on board and explain why they need our help. Ultimately, their children are missing. And there's not a whole lot that they can do about it but sit still and do their searches. Well, that's what I'm here for. I'm going to start riling you guys up to get a little bit of attention drawn to some of these unknown missing people's story. The one we'll be going over next week is going to be Little Wesley Dale Morgan. Now, when I was doing this episode, it was heartbreaking, to say the least, knowing that I have a 3-year-old myself, and the little boy just vanished out of nowhere. And that was in 2002. So, another story that I can share with you guys that was another kind of like motivation for this series here is Elizabeth Smart, which I'm sure most of you know her as well because she has autobiographies about her story and was national news at the time of her disappearance. And it was all strung together by a street preacher. Her captor was using the floor that God was leading his way and, the Almighty was the reason he did what he did. When in actuality, he was just a sick individual. And his wife was no different. Brian and Wanda who were Elizabeth's captors were two extremely sick individuals. To be able to take a 14-year-old girl straight out of her home in the middle of the night while she was asleep and then continue to rape her and starve her and chain her up and force her to watch pornography and drink alcohol at 14 years old. I've watched plenty of her documentaries and heard the stories and gone over all of the details on that case bit by bit, and I just can't applaud her enough for the strength that she had to push through all of that. With being kept from her family for a year, being told that you are your captor's husband, and, the other just atrociously awful things that he told her and tried to make her believe. Um, I've gone through some pretty traumatic things in my life myself, and I will tell you this, no amount of therapy can make them just disappear. They are always going to be with us. And even though Elizabeth was returned home safely, she still went through one of the worst years of her life. Granted, she's successful now. She has a family, she's married, she's got kids. But she's always going to have that thought in the back of her mind of what she went through back then. There's going to be things that just happen that they don't mean to trigger something, but they do. And, that's a really hard thing to deal with for people. And most people look at her story and go, yeah, but she's successful and she made it home. And it's like, yeah, all of those things are accurate. But at the same time, those traumas are forever going to weigh her life down. And when it comes to these videos that I'm going to be putting up, there's just two things that I ask of everyone that ends up watching them. Everybody has those little identifying factors. With Elizabeth's case, if someone would have paid a little bit more attention to those factors, she probably would have been found a lot sooner, especially considering her captors were taking her out in public. All around where she went missing, and even in San Diego, California. Which brings me back to, just because you don't live in the town that someone went disappearing in doesn't mean that you're not seeing them in your town. With Elizabeth, they moved her from Salt Lake City, Utah, all the way to San Diego, California. And then granted, they did go back. But at the same time, they were originally set up to go to New York or Chicago, one of the bigger cities where Mr. Brian Mitchell thought he could make more money and hustle more people and possibly kidnap more women, because while they were in San Diego, he tried to do exactly that. He tried to kidnap yet another younger woman. And it really makes you think sometimes, like, just because somebody's kidnapped in a little town doesn't mean that that's where they get stuck staying. They could be drugged anywhere across this country, or even the world for that matter. And everybody's sitting here like, oh, well, that could have been her, but I don't live where she went missing, so I don't think it is. I want you to wipe that philosophy out of your mind right now. Okay? If you stumble across something or you see someone that really looks like the people that I've talked about in my stories, please pick up the phone, use the helplines that I'm providing, submit a report online, or a tip online. Even if you want to do it anonymously, that is totally fine. Just get the word out there. Let it be known that there is still possibilities of this person being around. I have a little scar right here next to my eye that my little brother gave me when we were children, and even to this day, like I said, I'm 25 and I still have that scar. We wear makeup and we change our appearances, but there's some things that we can never change. And those are the things I want you guys to keep out for when you're walking the streets or you're seeing those things that just make you a little uneasy sometimes. I was watching a video on Facebook the other day, and it just popped up on my newsfeed, and it was about this woman who was at a bar, and these two guys came in, and they picked her as the one they were going to run their little game on and try to kidnap. And the bartender never noticed it. There was a guy who was standing by and literally watched them pour the stuff into her drink and watched her start to get a little hazy, you know, a little dizzy, kind of falling asleep on herself. And as those two men tried to carry her out of that building that had just drugged her, the standby who saw them do it said nothing, didn't try to stop them, didn't say a word to anyone. And then as those two men tried to carry that girl out the front door of that bar, all the bouncer asked is she okay? The men said, yeah, she's too drunk. She's had too much to drink. And then they got to the parking lot, and as they're cramming this girl's almost completely unconscious body into the backseat of their car, a homeless woman actually is the one who kind of stopped the whole act going on. You know, she made a fuss that she wanted to speak with the woman. She wanted to see her. And, you know, she didn't like what they were doing. The guy raised hell and flipped over the homeless lady's shopping cart that she had, so she knew something was up. You know, we all get those gut instincts of something's just not right here. And she started yelling and ended up calling over 4 other women. And the men pulled the woman out of her car, and they went to leave as soon as she got with those four girls who came over to help her. And while those 4 girls were standing there trying to make sure that she was okay, one of those bystanders decided to take a picture of his license plate. And what that woman doesn't realize is by doing that and making those reports and coming over like they did, they could have just saved thousands of women. Thousands of women just by saying something, just by coming over. Now, the man inside the bar who said nothing, the bouncer at the doorway to the bar that said, oh, well, okay, she's just too drunk. Question those things, okay? Because we all know our limits. I do not know one person who's going to go out and get so plastered drunk that they literally cannot even walk out the door themselves, because in that video, those men were literally dragging that woman's feet on the ground. And both of the men said nothing. Didn't try to stop it, didn't try to help her. That woman could be dead right now because of people standing by just not saying anything. So, as I go through these episodes and I make them weekly, just keep in mind that nothing is too small of a piece of information. And just because you don't live in the town where someone went missing doesn't mean you're not seeing them. So until next week, stay alive, stay safe, and stay vigilant. Thank you.